Hello, and welcome to episode 29 of the Time to Calibrate podcast. I'm Marc Levesque, and my co-host today is Brent Robillard from the Calibrated Wrist. Unfortunately, Bob couldn't be with us today as he's traveling back from Ottawa, where we had an event last night with a whole bunch of collectors. We do, however, have a very special guest with us, Mitchell Wein, president of Marathon Watch Company. Welcome to the show, Mitch.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. Now, we always start with a wrist check, and since you're the guest of honor, what's on your wrist?
What's on my wrist? I am wearing the steel navigator, the Adnac steel navigator with Adnac engraved on the side.
Yes, with the red bezel.
The red bezel, the first time we've ever done a red bezel in honor of Canada, and I think the red and white goes very well. And applique maple leaf, which is done in accordance with the actual CGSB specification, which is Canadian General Standards Board specification for the maple leaf. Can't make any mistakes. I've seen people do maple leaf products, but it doesn't look like the official maple leaf. And I love this watch. I was very good teammanship in deciding on how this would be designed in our offices in Vaughan, and it was a tribute to the 60th anniversary of our new Canadian flag, which was developed in 1966. So that's what I'm wearing today.
Very cool. Like, I have a friend that has the Marathon SAR with the applique maple leaf on the dial, and it's such a beautiful applique. Like, it's got some relief to it, and it's metallic. It's absolutely beautiful.
It's screwed in from the bottom.
Oh, really? Wow, that's really cool to know.
Yeah, very neat.
Which one does your friend have? The original one I did many years ago?
Yeah, the one from many years ago. The original one.
That went up in value a lot, Huh?
Yes, and he knows that too. Brent, what's on your wrist?
This morning I actually wore the OSRD. And normally Friday would be my time to start putting on the SS Nav, but because I thought Bob was going to join us on the show this morning, and I was pretty sure, reasonably sure he was going to wear that, I thought, well, I'll try to be a little bit different. But Bob couldn't join us, and nonetheless, I have this beautiful OSRD, and I love this particular dial actually, and the Mariglow works really, really well.
Yeah, it's a great watch. I had one of those navigators before too. They're fantastic pieces. So unfortunately, I don't have a Marathon watch, but I do have a Wein family
let's
watch.
skip over that.
No, I've got your cousin's watch.
You have from my cousin.
There you go. So it's a Hamden.
It's a Hampton.
What's really cool is that we've got our podcast engraved on the back, on the medallion.
So nice.
Yeah. I love this watch. And we went to the Marathon get-together in Vancouver, and I specifically wore this. And I went to see
my cousin Joe.
No, Joe wasn't there, but Marty was there. And so Marty and I did a selfie with the watch, and we sent it to Joe in real time. So that was really cool. So
he had the big opening for the reopening of his brand in
Chicago. Yeah. I was invited to that. Unfortunately, couldn't make it to Chicago, but it looks like they had a great time at that event.
It was a great time because it was coinciding with the what was it called again?
The Wind Up
show.
Yeah, it was Wind Up in Chicago.
Yeah.
Joe is such a nice guy. I met him in Toronto last year. He had a booth next to yours, and he and I kind of hit it off, and he showed me his watches, and I thought that was a really interesting one. And then he emailed me the week after saying, "Oh, it was nice meeting you, and I'd love for you to take a look at the watch." And so he sent me one months before they were ready to launch. And he says, "Take a look at it, have fun with it, and then I'll let you know when you're ready." And then I wrote something in with Brent, and then Brent took the pictures for the article in the Calibrated Wrist. And I think I was the first one to review this line of watches.
You know what? He's a great guy. He's actually the bizarro me, because so his
That's
grandfather.
saying something.
I know, huh? His grandfather was my grandfather's older brother, and my great-grandfather thought it was a great idea to make Weinstern Watch, which is the original name of the watch company, to expand that a brother should be in every major city working for the family, which was run by oldest brother Alex. But Joe and I have always had that relationship, and I think it's because he was living in California and he became a computer engineer in Palo Alto, and in those days, I mean, imagine he could have worked for Apple or anybody, but his dad called him to go back into the mechanical watch business in Chicago. They had a big client. They have Fantasy Diamonds, but they also had the Sears Roebuck account, which was, I think, an interesting account. They had many big
Absolutely.
jewelry accounts, whereas we didn't have jewelry accounts. But we both had, we worked with our fathers. It wasn't have to work with our fathers. We chose to work with our fathers. And um, I think it's great working with your family. And, I watched my dad work with his team, and, you know, uh, they say it's lonely at the top, and many times it is, but it's not lonely if you work with the people who you work with as a team and as equals. And I think that's where both our companies have been successful. Of course, we've had many downs, more downs than ups. It's hard in the watch industry, especially with the evolution of the quartz movement and a lot of people manufacturing wristwatches in countries which are very cheap to manufacture. And
Mm.
when you know, it's hard to compete against, here we are in Canada, we pay very high taxes for reasons being that we have a good social system to support, and pay well wages so people can live a good family life, whereas other countries aren't the same. But
Yeah.
in Switzerland, we're very much the same as in Switzerland, I feel, the way we work. Um, and Joe and I help each other, to be honest with you. Like, I assembled those watches for Joe. Those are assembled in my factory in Switzerland.
Well, that's fantastic.
It's it,
So
it,
then
it's
I have a
that
marathon.
we have good, yeah. Well, no, my cousin Joe did that whole design with that onion crown and
Yeah, and the
the coin
bezel.
edge.
Yeah, that coin-eye bezel is
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
He's a great designer, and actually he's a great engineer. The way if you notice on the back of his watch, uh, you could remove the solid back
Yep.
and actually expose the sapphire back so you could see the movement working, which is always interesting.
It's neat because it's clips in due to two little bearings that are in the case. So
Yes,
it
and it's
snaps into place.
an oval snap, and it always
Yeah.
snaps upright.
Yeah, and it feels it's there's some things that are tactile and they're fun to play with that are satisfying when they snap into place. That's one of those things. Once
I
it
know.
snaps into place, it just feels like you want to do it over again and over again. It's really cool.
You're right.
Um,
That's why I like a bezel watch. I like playing with the bezel.
yeah,
Sort of
same here.
like
And the
rosary
marathon bezels
beads.
are some of the best in the business.
Yeah, they make a sound.
Yeah, yeah, they're solid. They're really solid. So for those of you who are listening that are not aware or know who Mitchell Wein is, I'll go through a little bit of a bio. So Mitchell Wein is the third generation leader of Marathon Watch Company. Raised in the business founded by his grandfather, he worked alongside his father, former President Leon Wein, before taking over the company himself. Under Mitchell's leadership, Marathon has expanded beyond pure government contracting to establish a broader consumer presence. This includes a stronger direct to consumer and e commerce strategy, along with a regular public engagement through interviews and podcasts like this one. Marathon's roots trace back to 1904 when it began as the Weinstern Company, later becoming Wein Brothers. And in 1939, Mitchell's grandfather, Morris Wein, officially founded Marathon in Montreal to supply precision timepieces across North America, making the beginning of the multi generational family owned business that continues to thrive today. During World War II, Marathon started providing timing instruments to Allied forces and has since remained a trusted supplier of military spec watches to Allied governments. Today, Marathon produces watches according to US military standards, as well as other Allied specifications, and continues to receive purchase orders from the US government. Leon Wein, Mitchell's father and former president, led key product programs that are still central to Marathon's catalog. Notable products include the Navigator Pilot's Watch, developed in 1986 in collaboration with Kelly Air Force Base, along And then later on, designs featured Adinak branding, Canada backwards, due to contract restrictions. Another key product is the search and rescue diver line, the SAR, as everybody calls it, created at the request of the Canadian Armed Forces, search and rescue technicians, and clearance divers in the early 2000s. This line was later adapted to include tritium tube illumination to meet U.S. military needs. In 2024-2025, Marathon will celebrate 85 years in operation, highlighting its continuous family stewardship from Morris to Leon to Mitchell, ongoing government contracts, and its purpose-built ethos of designing in Canada while manufacturing in Switzerland. Also noticed that in 2026, Mitchell will hit his 40th anniversary at Marathon. Congratulations, Mitch. His LinkedIn
Thanks.
page is tiny. Just that one job on there. Also, I met him in person in Toronto last year, and there's no way that he's been working at the same place for 40 years. How does that sound?
We've moved around. We've moved around.
He moved around quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in many Marathon offices over the years. But my fondest memories are when I was a little boy and I used to go visit my dad in Montreal. I don't remember 407 McGill Street. That's where my grandfather's first office was, which was near the port. But we moved from there. I guess I was around 6 years old to 286 St. Paul Street, which is next to Place d'Youville, which is where New France is the old port, and that's where New France came to be. And nunnery was behind us, and we were always watching the boats come in and out of the port. My grandfather had the two top floors of 286 St. Paul, and I watched Expo going on.
Expo 67.
Mana's World and the monorails going by and watching, the boats filled with grain coming in and going to Europe. It was, and it was just normal part of life. But actually, I realized in retrospect that was great learning experience and great piece of history that I was seeing that I could now tell the story about. And then we moved to Toronto.
My uncle worked on those boats, the grain boats that used to get filled in Montreal.
Oh, really?
It was first made on one of those.
Really?
Yeah, a long time ago. Ports changed quite a bit, and that Place d'Youville that you're talking about is an open museum now, and you can go in and go under, and you can actually see the cobblestone streets that were underneath everything that's there now, and you can walk through all that history. It's really neat.
Oh, you're right. They raised the land.
Yeah.
And the nuns used to live there until I'd say probably to the 1950s or 40s. That was a great nunnery.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if that's the right word. It's
convent,
a monastery, convent.
Yeah.
You're right.
A monastery too. Yeah. I think it depends on what it's being used for. So, Mitch, 3 generations in, your family has been running Marathon for over 8 decades. What's the biggest philosophy that's been passed down from your grandfather and father?
Okay. There's a few things, but one of the major things that I ever learned is that to survive in life, you have to be able to change. And my father and grandfather always believed there's a Japanese proverb. I won't tell it to you in Japanese because I don't know Japanese, but it's the branch that bends with the wind won't snap. And through my 40 years of being here, there has been so many changes that we had to modernize and do things better and learn from each other. And another thing is that, it isn't my name that's the family. A name is not important in life. It's Marathon is a family, and even though we have a factory far away in Switzerland and we have all our head office technology and an organization being run in Canada, we all help each other and I think the reason why we're successful is because we do listen to each other and we work in teams and, respect each other. And I also see, you know, I'm one generation, but there's two different generations below myself that are really running this company well and learning. You never stop learning, you see. My father never stops learning. My father's constantly sending me articles every day. Uh, he's 93 and he reads the Wall Street Journal. He reads the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, National Post. He's, you know, he's made that lazy boy really worth his while. And my mom is also like, they're very kind and smart people. And I think that doing the right thing is very important. Uh, I have something here. I have three different proverbs that I believe in, and I have them behind my desk with a piece of Scotch tape. I'll read it to you. The only real failure is the failure to try. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing. And all we know about the future is that it will be different. And I think those are three important things that gives us life lessons and allows us to go on our journey on a daily basis, no matter how old you are, what position you do, or where you work. So that's my life advice, sort of.
But you can see that underneath your leadership that you have actually lived all three of those philosophies, especially that first Japanese proverb about adapting. It was kind of under your leadership that the marathon was brought online. And I guess by that, I mean, opened up to the general public. But I also understand it that despite primarily being a producer of military watches, many individuals in all areas of governments were already seeking you out as early as the 90s. They were the people that had been issued your watches in the public service, but they wanted them for their civilian lives as well. Particularly, I think, after the Gulf War. Was this the development that eventually made you say, let's move away from the government contracts, or was it something else entirely?
No, life changed, as we know. So what was important to my father and my grandfather was that we would have a stable business that would give us all, a decent middle class living. And working hard was all you needed to do to make that living and be honest in your lives. My grandfather, after World War II, which was very successful for him economically, gave my grandfather extra admiration, my father extra admiration for the way government is run. And many people believe in small government, but because we had big government with inspectors inspecting and rules to follow and specs to follow, things were very fair. My father did not have to sell his product based on advertising or hiring some celebrity to hold a watch. The proof in the pudding was the fact that we were able to produce watches that not only were functional but strong, and we were able to save always the government good money, good taxpayers' money, save the taxpayers' money basically, by giving them a no-frills watch. All they were buying was a quality stopwatch or a quality wristwatch that met the specifications of the time. And over the years, my grandfather had some struggles and started selling also to jewelry stores. And, one of the astonishing things was I asked my dad when I entered in the business, is like, shouldn't we be selling to jewelry stores? Because he was only selling really in those days to the Canadian government and US government GSA division. And he gave me a stack of NSF checks, and it was in a cash box in the safe. And I don't know if everybody understands what an NSF check is, but it means non-sufficient funds. And there was a lot of jewelry stores that bought from my grandfather and didn't pay his bills. My grandfather worked really hard and worked on very little margins. All you need is one bankruptcy. You might as well wipe out your profits for 3 months to 6 months in a company. And he went through a lot of that. And my father persevered with the Canadian government. I mean, we were supplying clocks. I mean, we were right there at the port. We were doing a lot of actual Navy clocks, which we contract out to many shipbuilders through McGill Maritime Services. I don't even know if they're still in business in Montreal, but what I believe happened was it was a natural occurrence of events. My father was trusted by the US government and by the Canadian government. The US government came to my dad at one point after us supplying the GGW 113, the general purpose mechanical watch, and saving them a lot of money in the 1970s. Do we think, well, they in those days, it went through Ottawa. There was a defense office, and Kelly Air Force Base reached out to see if we could develop an electric version of a navigator watch based on old specifications, but changing up things. And my father was able to do that. My father was able to do that because we were doing much more complicated things. We were doing timers for torpedoes, and my father had a very terrific friend who is a watchmaker, Jean-Maurice Huguenot, who still works for Marathon after 50 years in Switzerland, and made the effort to come up with a good design and use an electric movement. In those days, we were the first ones to supply the US government with an electric movement watch. And that was, the movement came from a company called Harley, which eventually was bought over by the Ronda movement company. But I think my father never gave up. If he was given a project, could you do this? He did it. We did special chronograph for chronometers for aircraft carriers and special timers for the Harrier aircraft when we were given the challenge of making the componentry so small so it fit on a very old dashboard and moving the pushers to only one side because there were other instruments that it may interfere with. I think that that's what really did well for us. And when the Desert Storm came out, we're very privileged in the fact that we were military contractors and we had the contract. And the US government really needed to outfit their troops before attacks happened. And we're given large contracts. And we were able to fill them on time. But my dad moved me right away to Switzerland to be in the factory. We had many sub-suppliers in those days and many assemblers, and it was a great experience for me. I didn't sleep much for 6 months. I would be working in the factory, overseeing things, but I also learned from my science experience at Carleton University how to write a report. And every night I'd have my cheap Sears mechanical typewriter that I brought along with me and write a report. on a testing report. So we would be doing testing on every lot of 5,000 watches, choosing a number of watches for destruction and some equipment for doing testing in those days wasn't available. We had to go out to an outside lab. Everything always had to be ready for a Friday shipment because the inspector would come in from Frankfurt on a train and go through the watches, the report, and spot test watches. And this guy from Germany, I remember him. I won't tell you the name of the inspector, but he was really a hard ass. He was really hard, and he used to look for things to find wrong, and I knew he would. And it was I said to myself that this is really aggravating and scary and hard. And I said to myself, God, just put me through this now because I don't want to have to ever deal with anything like this again. Even I was staying in a hotel, and I don't know why the hotel did, but the inspector was put in the room right across my room. And you know what? He must have heard the typing all the time. It was a small little hotel. And I learned how to make a good watch and make it better, because if we didn't make a good watch, we would fail testing. And the war ended. I was working with my dad, trying to modernize things. We eventually got our own computer. I remember it was over $5,000. I mean, we used inventory cards. Everything was written in those days. I still do my calculations by hand. It's easier for me. But the internet came about. We had surplus. We had a lot of surplus watches. So if we had a contract, let's say if we had a contract for 7,300 watches, there's always defects and issues, there's stoppers. So we would always make 7,600 watches, a few hundred extra watches. Sometimes the government would have the option of a 3% increase if we offered it to them, and sometimes they took it, sometimes they didn't. But people wanted to buy the surplus, and we had no way of doing it. And we sold to a company that actually sold military surplus on the internet. And I decided that it would be a good thing, perhaps, if we have our own website so people could find out about our products. Not so much people, it was other governments, and it was government itself. Because remember, we might sell to the GSA, we might sell to DND or RCMP. DND is Department of National Defense for American listeners here. If I was buying a stopwatch, I would like to know the tolerances of it, and you could find that all through the website. So I figured it's better to have an informational website than mailing out or faxing out information, because whenever you write a report on, let's see, a centrifuge of white blood cells or anything, you have to give the timing, and the timing has to have tolerances at the end of the lab report. Just like when we used to incubate our watches, we still do. We have to give a tolerance of temperature because the temperature could vary within a 24-hour period. So these watches were incubated at a temperature of 120 degrees Fahrenheit, plus or minus 5 degrees Fahrenheit, and a humidity of 32%. And that's why you need to know what the tolerances are and what something looks like and how it holds in a hand, and what running time is of a watch or a stopwatch or a specific device that we manufacture. A difference from, I believe, what our company is and what other watch companies are is we never treated our watches as wrist watches, as a piece of jewelry. We treated our watches as instruments. We didn't treat our wristwatches any different than we would treat a stopwatch or a timer, which are fundamental to horology, to telling the time or testing time or measuring time. And I think that's the most important thing, that we were always to be functional and always make a better product and always improve upon ourselves.
You were talking about scientific testing and tolerances and writing the lab reports. And I know we talk a lot about Marathon as a producer of military watches, but the truth is really Marathon is a producer of watches for all areas of government, including the ones that you've just talked about. So as late as 2019, I think that you reported Marathon was still doing about 90% of its business with government. Has that consumer end grown since then, or are you still primarily government procurement with these instruments?
With our stopwatches that we manufacture and similar instruments, I'd say 90% are government, 7% are basically the industry, which is car manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, as well as science, which means many rehab centers buy thousands of our stopwatches. Our stopwatches are very important for rehab. Our mechanical stopwatches are very important for military training as well. Uh, Doing timing in lab, especially blood labs, virology labs. Um, so that's where I say that is our wristwatches, whereas we used to be 95%, actually I'd say 99% military, but not just military. It would be, the Department of Agriculture used to buy lots of our watches. I mean, they have crop sprayers and, people work. Listen, if your home base is Ottawa, you're in Eastern Standard Time, and if you have to go to base out in British Columbia, it's a 3-hour time difference. So a navigator is of good use for having 2 time registers. But I think what happened after the Persian Gulf War, many people were issued Marathon watches. And most of those watches didn't even have our name on it. We have codes on the back. Our cage code, our identifier for NATO was 38776. So all we did was to make the dial as clear as possible in accordance with the 46374 spec. We did not put Marathon on the dials. For the Canadian government, we did put Marathon on the dials. Persian Gulf War for the Canadian government was 20,000 pieces of the general purpose mechanicals. Just trying to think about what I was saying. So many soldiers were issued our watches, and when you're issued a watch, you have to return it back into service. But many commanders, after a warfighter has been out and given such precious time of their lives to their country, many people were allowed to take back their watches because that watch was with them during the journey. The watch is not like a shirt, it's not like a backpack. It's that journey. You're fighting with that watch on. You're in a cave with that watch on. It's been with you all those years. Those knocks and scratches and scrapes are not just on yourself. It's on your watch. And that's why a lot of people have, I think, really respected Marathon Watch. We've gained our market through respect. People want to have their children have that journey. Many of our watches from World War II still exist. Many of our watches from the Persian Gulf War from the 1970s still exist, and it's already been passed on 3 generations. And they still work.
That's incredible. Now, given your time at Marathon, are there any pivotal moments, maybe a challenge or a breakthrough that helped shape how you led the company?
There's a lot of them. Um, you know, when you lead a company, you have to realize it's a big weight on your shoulders. You have the responsibility whether times are good or times are bad. And we've been through bad times that, you know, the team as a whole is the most important. And you have to take care of your team and encourage your team, even when times look tough. You have to always, it's my faith to always be positive and always know that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. And it's proven right. Um, I've learned how to work with people from my experience with my parents. Um, and I've also, as anybody at my age, been through a lot of sadness, and your friends and family pick you up, and a lot of my friends are at Marathon. I mean, you come to work every day, you work with these people. They for years upon years, they become family and friends. You know, they're family and friends. And I think that's what's made this company really a great place to work. And it's a nice, safe place where we help each other. And no, I've learned that. I believe that Marathon has been in business for over 85 years, and I believe that the ethics of Marathon aren't just my family's ethics or my ethics. I believe that they're Canadian ethics as well. And I remember in the 1990s when we reestablished our factory in Le Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. The laws in Switzerland were very different than the laws in Canada. And I made the choice that it was time that Canadian values took precedence over any foreign government's values. And one of those major values was that women have women are equal to men, and in many we take that for granted. In many countries, they're not. And in Switzerland those days, I was in many boardrooms and I was in many big companies, and I noticed that there was never a woman on the board of directors, and at least there was never a woman president. There was one company in Bienne which had a woman president because she inherited from her father, but I believe that what I saw was woman. I remember my first day working at the factory, and all the women were leaving at 11:45, but the men left at 12 for lunch. Lunch was 12 to 1:30, but of course we started work extremely early with the sunshine. The reason why they were leaving early was because they had to go prepare dinner, prepare lunch for their husbands and the family. And I thought to myself, that's actually really sexist. Uh, and I I I knew hard workers, and I saw my mother and many women, and I knew my mother was really a good commander, and I allowed our company. I told them that you know you have to have respect for each other, and I was having issues. Our One of our first directors I hired maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, was Natalie Huguenot, who's a fantastic person and still my friend. Um, she wasn't getting the respect she deserved from the staff. And the reason why she wasn't getting respect, I felt, was because she was a woman. And I remember bringing everybody into the cafeteria at that time and giving a speech about Canadian values. And I hope that from that day on, she got the respect she deserved, and I'm sure she did because she's a great woman. And that's about it. So Canadian values, equality, helping others is a big value of mine. Many people say that Marathon is a military manufacturer and military manufacturers should be stopped, but we have to remember something. We're Canadian, and our devices are maybe used by the military, but what does the Canadian military do? There's an earthquake in Haiti. We're down there. You know, there's a tsunami in Sri Lanka that happened, and we brought our water filtration machines to help those people. You know, what are we as Canadians? We help those who can't help themselves. And I think that that's a great path to walk on.
That's amazing. Just so we're clear, that question I asked was Bob's question. He would have asked it if he was here, and the next one is his as well. And I really like this one. It's amazing that Marathon has been part of your family for so long. If your grandfather could see Marathon today, what do you think would surprise him the most about the brand?
Do you know what would surprise him the most about the brand? I think he'd be surprised that we were able to survive amongst all the other Canadian watch companies. You know, when I was little, there was many Canadian watch companies. And through perseverance and his values, I think he'd be surprised that I listened to him. But I did listen to him. He was a very kind man. And actually, that's what everybody says about my grandfather. He was a very kind man. And, you know, I believe that, you know, there's a path in your life to spread goodness. And, you know, when you wake up and when you go to sleep, when you sit in your house and you walk on the road, you know, there's a lot of people which are downtrodden and, you know, don't see what life is all about. They think life is all about their fancy cars and fancy clothing, and it's not what life is about. Money doesn't buy you happiness. I believe that my grandfather showed me that. My grandfather went through a lot of hard times, and actually, um, when my grandfather passed away, uh, most of his money was used up, but not used up for personal uses. It was used up to help other people. I remember my grandfather saying that, you know, you can never turn anybody down. If someone has come to you to ask for help, there's a reason why, and you should listen to them and don't let someone walk away empty-hearted or empty-pocketed. And this is another story. This is like I'm telling you guys this story because you're Canadians, and Marc's in Montreal. But Marc, do you still have CFCF radio? That was a big
Absolutely.
customer of ours. Okay, CFCF radio and CFCF
12, the TV
yeah,
channel.
but it
Yeah.
was
CFCF.
600 on the AM dial
Yep.
when I was a
CJAD is
kid.
taking that over now.
Oh, has it really?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was
The
800 on the AM dial.
800, it's still there. They still talk radio all day long.
And you want to hear a story? So, anyways, I made my own AM radio from buying parts at Radio Shack in, I think it was in Le Bazaar on Côte Vertu. And I was listening to the radio with my headphones at night because I wasn't allowed to listen to the radio at night. So I used to, you know, I had my flashlight and my comic books and my
Sure.
beats and
Listen to the
everything.
Expos. I used to do that too.
Anyways, I used to listen to this guy named Pastor Johnson. Do you remember Pastor? I'm older than you, but there used to be a talk show on, it must have been around 9 o'clock at night. And there was talk show, and they're trying to raise money. There was a big earthquake somewhere in Central America, and I can't remember what country was hit, but it was a big earthquake, I guess in 1976 or 1975.
That was Nicaragua.
Was it?
Yeah, it hit Managua. Yeah.
And I remember Pastor Johnson on the radio thanking my grandfather for his large donation. And my father, I could hear yell, like, when my father found out, it's like, what's he giving away all the money? We have no money to give anymore. But, it all comes around. And, I respected my grandfather for that. Your life legacy is not the money you produce or the factories you're in charge of or the countries you're leader of. It's I believe it's how you make people feel when you leave the room,
Yeah, that's amazing.
and giving hope.
You do a lot of charity work yourself, actually, through the synagogue and with disadvantaged people in the community, and from what I understand too, with LGBTQ things as well.
Not so much. I take care of my family. One of my really, I wish I could be better. I mean, the business is a full time, but um, sometimes I guess I sound like a priest. But I I believe that those people that can't help themselves really do need that extra help. And I've been fortunate. I learned a lot from a friend of mine named Hirsch Silverstein. He passed away a few years ago, but he changed my life forever. He was living at a place called Rena. He was a client at Rena, which is a special home for people which have physical as well as mental disabilities. And Hirsch's life story was he'd be around 85, 10. He was the same age as my mother. And he slipped away from his grandmother's hands and ran in front of a streetcar and had a brain injury when he was around 6 years old. But he stopped growing at that point, meaning his mind stopped developing, but his mind did. And he knew a plethora of facts, and he would just try to make everybody so happy. He always thought about other people. When it was his birthday, he'd write up cards and on paper and slip it under everybody's door in the institution. I shouldn't call it an institution, but it's a home. And the goodness from him. And also the way I saw people look at him because he was disabled disturbed me. And I felt that I have to explain to people, it's not that it's the right of physically or mentally challenged people. They're holy people. I used to get frustrated because people would question poor Hirsch. He used to eat, and the food used to come out of his mouth because he used to talk at the same time as food came out of his mouth. And people used to say, well, we don't want him eating near us or eating near the buffet table because, food would come out. And they didn't see the goodness in him. A lot of people didn't, but a lot of people did. And I think that everybody has a place in society to make this a better world. And people should think about that when they judge other people.
Well, you talked a little bit about how the ethos of perhaps the Canadian military, the Canadian government is maybe different from that in other militaries around the world. And you mentioned, the DART team heading off to Sri Lanka and of course to Haiti and that sort of thing. And I know we're going to do an even deeper dive into all those military things, but something surprised me when I was doing some research for this interview. And It was that when I typed in vintage marathon, there were some other kinds of watches that came up that are not synonymous with marathon in the way I see it in a contemporary world. There were sort of beautiful vintage dress watches, gold-filled watches, watches with Col de Vache lugs, sector dials, pie plate dials, and even small seconds hands and things like that. So can you tell us a little bit about that side of marathon, and maybe then how did the military watches take precedence eventually?
So, being a family business, Reinstrom Watch, my grandfather had the one brother who used to prepare all the parts to send to New York to be assembled, or to Montreal to be assembled, was my uncle Monia, who lives in Geneva, and my father, he was a few years older than my grandfather. And so when the Weinstrom Watch Company started to break apart, like my cousin Joe's grandfather pulled out, my grandfather pulled out in 39. I think Joe's dad pulled out in 1922. Um, the still the brothers helped each other. And what really made us very strong and very good at getting great pricing from the dial factories and case factories and movement factories was Monia used to buy 5,000 movements or 10,000 movements at a time. 3,000 went to Joe's grandfather, 2,000 went to New York, and we divided it amongst the family and amongst the different marks. And I remember when I was little, in Montreal, we used to assemble watches, and in Montreal, we had a very great watchmaking school, and there's still a good one in Sherbrooke. But we used to assemble our own watches, and the cases used to come from my grandfather's friend, the Liberty Watch Case Factory in the United States. Straps were all from Montreal, and dials were made in Montreal. Some dials came from Switzerland, but we used to mark the dials with Marathon. They used to come blank. And then my father had his cousin, the Wangers. My grandfather's sister married a man named Sam Wanger, and they started their own watch business too, but still they were involved in the family. And we used to stamp the different trademarks on the different dials. And from having economies of scale, we were able to do very good pricing. As I said before, though, my after the war, there wasn't much business for the government except for stopwatches and clocks for hospitals. Uh, my grandfather knew how to make basic watches. We had nurses' watches. We had nuns' watches. And he made jewelry watches and quite high caliber quality watches, which you could see on the internet, on eBay. We have our collections here of watches that were not military used, but we always went back to I think, our happy moment of supplying watches to people who are actually going to use the watches. So with a marathon watch, I always felt if you really are wanting to buy a marathon watch, you should be using it. You shouldn't be keeping it in a jewelry drawer. You can have a Cartier usually could for your tuxedo when you go fancy schmancy on Saturday night to the ballet. But otherwise, if you really want to be on time and you want your watch to keep on working, you should wear a general purpose mechanical watch. Because the
That's
most important thing, listen, the most important thing for a watch or a clock is being able to tell the time.
yeah.
Let's be serious. If you can't tell the time, what is the worth of a watch? And that's also another discussion, guys, we could have later today if you want. It's the dilemma. Do I buy a watch with a date or no date? And many people have that dilemma these days because Of course, we produce without date for certain militaries because the most important thing is to see the time. Why else would you want to watch if you couldn't see the time? You shouldn't have all these little doodads or a dial that has all these drawings on it if you want to just see the time. You know, you can't depend on the clock being in every room, let alone a marathon clock.
So Marathon supplied watches during World War II and continues to manufacture military spec timepieces today. How do you balance historical continuity with modern innovation?
Well, we just did a series on the history of the SAR. And I was interviewed by my own team. We all sat together going through all the different versions of the search and rescue watch. The search and rescue watch went through many changes and developments. And the reason why it has is because materials that may have been used for other industries have become better and easier to find and maneuver and use them in a wristwatch or a stopwatch. And what I'm saying is, you know, in the watch industry many years ago, it was always plexiglass that everybody used for their crystals. And we could make a better watch by using sapphire when sapphire was becoming commonly available to the industry. About the quality of metals compared to years ago, when we used 316L steel, we could really, by using the proper steel manufacturers, really make sure that the percentages of nickel and strength of the steels are more accurate. There are certain countries which make great steel. You know, Canada's one of them.
Absolutely.
Amongst other metals and important minerals. That's another conversation, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. That Marathon SAR, I remember when it came out back in 2001. I think I was one of the first to review it in a publication for InSync magazine way back in the day.
Yeah, you
And
had black hair.
yeah, I had hair. Let's just start with that. I had hair. But I remember when I had gotten it, it was my personal watch. I'd purchased it and I had it on rubber strap. And I reached out to Marathon in Toronto, and it was you who replied, and you sent me the bracelet so I could have it for the review, which is our first communication 24 years ago. And I remember that how fast it was that you provided that bracelet, and how convenient it was for the review, and I was very grateful. So yeah, it's a great watch.
Well, I was surprised that never anybody even knew about Marathon. Suddenly, it was because of the internet that we suddenly became international.
Absolutely.
Because no one was going to a library to find a book on Canadian watch manufacturing. It just it happened to be that story people told from mouth to ear.
Yeah, there was a website back in the day called Military Watch Resource, I believe.
Right.
And that guy was the one who was selling the SAR online. I think it was Surplus, probably how that all started through him.
It was.
And that's who I'd gotten the watch from. And it was such an interesting piece. And because I'm Canadian, I pushed to have that public, put into publication. And yeah, the rest is, as they say, history.
Well, thanks, Mark.
No problem.
Because of you.
You know, the story you told a little earlier about your father holding up a stack of NSF checks. I actually heard that anecdote. You told it to Ariel Adams in an interview a few years ago. And
right.
Of course, it sort of makes sense that Marathon would double down on its government contracts because of that sort of mentality too. But those contracts, as you've kind of mentioned yourself, they come with things like strict oversight, and the profit margins are actually very slim. And because you guys started manufacturing in Switzerland again, I've also heard stories about how the inflation of the Swiss franc eroded those margins on occasion, sometimes down to nothing. So I
because
suspect.
we were stuck in a
Yeah,
contract. We were
absolutely.
stuck in a contract. So the original navigator, which with the Harley movement, I think my father made money for the first year. And the second year, the Swiss franc, the Swiss franc in those days was 55 cents to the US dollar. And it went up to 65 cents and then 70 cents. And because we work on such low margins, um, because we're sole source and the government has to look over our costing to allow us to make a certain amount of profit, like 15% profit, was all eroded by the Swiss franc going up. But my father was a brilliant business. He has a degree from McGill, uh, commerce and economics, and he bought futures on the Swiss franc. In actuality, Marathon in those days was selling the Navigator for $53.75. I had the original contracts, and we should get permission to republish those original contracts from the 70s. But, when you sell 7,000 watches and you're making $3 a watch, that's $21,000. $21,000 in those days could buy you four Ford Tempos. And what that means, it was a lot of money. Okay. But, we made money on the futures of the Swiss francs to cover the losses. And so it was a way of doing an insurance policy in case the Swiss franc went up. You should know, though, today, the Swiss franc has gone from 1.1 last year to 1.25. So us people who manufacture in Switzerland, using really the best equipment and best watchmakers, have not only had our costing increased by 15%, but unfortunately, selling into the United States, the American consumer is getting a 39% tax on
Oh
their
yeah, that's a can of
import,
worms
which
right
is,
there.
well, you know,
I know.
I think things will change. Things get negotiated. There's no reason why the United States and Switzerland can't have good friendship and good economic
Absolutely.
terms. And I think that will change. I really do. But people have to understand, when a Swiss company has to raise its pricing just to cover the loss and cost, like if you want the best, you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's about it. I saw that some companies really raised their pricing. I don't blame them, but things will even out. In
Yeah.
Canada, we're very fortunate for one reason that there's a Switzerland free trade agreement with the Canadian government that was signed many years ago. So Swiss products coming into Canada have no duty. So Canadians do have that great benefit of buying Swiss products. Except I think Swiss cheese has duty on it as of our dairy board.
Yeah. And for those listening, in case they didn't get the reference, a Ford Tempo is basically a Toyota Corolla of the day by Ford. Just had to put that in there.
It was 4,500. Okay. Because I actually wanted to buy a car of my own once I was out of university. I was tired of, my parents didn't get me a car like other people's parents did. And I took the bus, but I wanted to buy my own car. I was saving up. And Ford Tempo was 4,500. And then there was the Mercury equivalent,
Topaz.
which is Topaz, which is $350 more.
Yeah.
That's what it's the same car. I'm buying
Different grill.
I'm
That's
buying
it.
I'm buying the Tempo.
Yeah.
Well, this might tell you something about my family, but we bought the Topaz.
Oh, really? Yeah. You're fancy people.
My dad had Crown Victoria.
Or just not
Oh,
so
really?
savvy.
My dad always had a Chevrolet. He
Oh,
always
wow.
liked the Chevrolet Caprice Classic.
Yeah,
And
big
then
car.
and then we moved over to the Buick. It had big trunks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it could fit 8.
Yeah, exactly. If you light them sideways.
You were just talking a second ago about friendship and the idea that some of this too shall pass, but it kind of ties into the last question I asked you as well. Given these small margins and the fact that things like this can go awry in the business that you're in, it seems like Marathon plays the long game. It's about building relationships. So I'm curious if you have any stories you could share about how those relationships were built with certain individuals or institutions, how they might have been tested, or how they might have prevailed in spite of, against all odds.
Sure. Maybe I should tell you the story about the chronograph, just as I'll tell you about the SAR. So the SAR was developed for the Canadian government. What happened with the Canadian government, I had many friends in the military going through university and living in Ottawa. I knew a lot of people which worked for governments, and I worked for Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. And basically, I felt that I, as well as my friends, even the ones that worked for the post office, were public servants, and it was a very noble job to be a public servant. No matter what you did for the government, it was a noble piece of work. The Canadian government was buying our general purpose mechanical wristwatches for many years, our military stopwatches, many peculiar varieties of timing devices. But they were buying their search and rescue dive watches from Rolex. And I was a bit pissed off being a Canadian taxpayer, knowing what the Canadian government was spending on a watch when they could save a lot of money by buying from a Canadian company my dive watch. We had a dive watch in stock. It met the specs. It was 200 meters in depth. Instead of spending $2,000 a watch in those days, I think we were charging $275 or $300 for our search and rescue dive watch. And in a way, there was a monopoly. It was on that NSN. And I went to Ottawa and I went to Defense Engineering and explained my case. I remember going to Place du Portage, which is a government center with public works and government services. I think it was called Department of Supply and Services in those days. And I pleaded our case. But I also said it's a shame that my taxpayers' money, it could be used elsewhere if you save money on the watches. And they opened up the solicitation to allow us to bid. Of course, we had to show test results from an independent laboratory, and we started supplying the Canadian government. The cases that I was using to make those watches were from a small company that was a case manufacturer on the French border with Switzerland. I think it was near Geneva, Evian. And, they informed me that I would have to spend money to make a new tool because we're the biggest customer of that case, and I would have to make a new tool with them, and they would be using that to supply other companies because we weren't exclusive on that case. They owned the tooling for that case. And I spoke to a few friends of mine. A friend of mine named Andrew, who is from Nova Scotia, and he was always here. And I remember going to Nova Scotia and speaking to some people which worked on the Victoria class submarines, and we have a lot of battleships in Nova Scotia. And I said, we have to make a new case, but if I'm going to make a new case of our own, what don't you like about our watch? And number one thing was that They didn't like because underwater in cold circumstances, they wear gloves and it was hard to turn the bezel. So I did a drawing based on what I thought would lock in those mesh gloves. And I asked many friends what they thought. And I think that's a very important thing to ask trusted friends, especially people in the industry, but outside of the industry, because outside looking in could give you new insight. And I developed the design of the search and rescue watch to be more robust than the 200 meters we had before. We increased the water resistance to 300 meters by allowing a O-ring system on the tube and on the stem when you lock it in. But I also realized that this is going to be a watery atmosphere, so that's why we knurled the crown. There was a lot of ideas that came from actually our military clocks. Here, guys, I'm going to turn around my computer. You're in my office now anyways. So these are our military ship's clocks. This one's used for submarines. So it's once every 24 hours. But if you notice, the knurling of the locker for the actual clock is knurled, so you can't slip your hands. Anyhow, so an interesting story happened is my father didn't want to do it. Mr. Dreyfus, who was my mentor in Switzerland, told me that the watch looked like a potato because we had samples made, and my father was very upset because I think the tooling cost in those days $20,000, and he just felt that nobody would buy it, and how much could the Canadian government buy it? And I said, you'll see, they'll like it, they'll buy more and more because now it's affordable. And that's the thing, we're affordable. And we became very popular with the Canadian government designing that watch. One day, so every Christmas, what we did for Christmas every year was make a nice calendar in Switzerland. And I used to choose the pictures of, for the Christmas market for December and different things. But I also felt that, because you cannot give gifts to a government official, but we could send out Christmas calendars during Christmas. And one of our biggest customers was the GSA. And the people I worked with, like order entry people, I sent calendars. And on one picture was the picture of the GSAR.
The potato.
The potato. Without tubes. It had Mariglow. And we already had a history of it from Desert Storm. I got a call from a guy, and he says, do you sell this to the U.S. government in any way, this watch? I'm looking at this watch on a calendar. And I thought it was a crank call, but actually it was someone extremely high up in the U.S. government. And he wanted me to send specs and everything. Then I realized, it's 26 Federal Plaza, New York. It's across the Hoover Building. Yeah, it's real. And sent the specs, sent everything. And before you knew it, we were qualified to sell that to the U.S. government. It was fast-tracked through Washington. They wanted to change the NSN to an American NSN, but they had to keep it because NATO wouldn't change it because it's already designated by the Canadian government. And I was asked, could you make the quartz version with tritium tubes? And I said, sure, I could. And we did. I priced it out, and they assigned it a U.S. NSN. And from there on, our search and rescue watches have expanded into the reaches of many departments, not only in the United States government, but many other governments. Many allied governments do use our search and rescue watches as well as our navigators and general purpose mechanical wristwatches. And so that's a I thought that was an interesting story, guys. So
That was
glad
very
to tell
cool.
it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another one I'd like to know about. I saw a picture of you, a photograph. I believe it was with your father, and you guys were receiving an award from the U.S. Armed Forces, and it was a best value bronze medal, I believe, after the Gulf conflict. Can you tell us the story behind that?
Sure. Um, you know what? It wasn't for us. My father is so proud of that moment. I remember he was gleaming from ear to ear. In Richmond, Virginia, was our engineering department. We used to. My father used to visit Defense Depot Richmond, which is DLA Aviation in those days, because the engineering department for instruments uh, in the FSC category 6645 was there. And if we had new developments on watches or similar equipment in that category, we would work with the U.S. Department of Defense and go through qualification processes as well as discussions of what was needed in the warfighter in the future. We used to have big meetings with other companies because, as you know, the person who supplies the screws for a wing assembly is just as important as the person who supplies the, you know, fuel gauge. And what was that question again, Brett? What?
Just
Sorry.
it's just the story behind why you got that particular award.
Oh, so the story behind that award was because the U.S. government recognized us, even though we were a Canadian company. I've never seen a Canadian company ever given that award, but they appreciated the fact that we actually worked night and day to deliver all our orders on time. We delivered on time. We delivered without defect. We, you know, when things were important, uh, there was trucks waiting outside our factory for a sign off to bring our product to an airplane that had to go fly into Qatar right from Zurich. So we also developed, I think they recognized the fact that, we were doing steel navigators that cost a certain amount. And my father, you know, felt that we could save the US government money. In those days, we were able to save the government around $20 a watch by moving our case manufacturing to a new type of composite case, uh, which came from a POM standard, uh, to not only save the taxpayer money, let's say at least $700,000 in those days, 30,000 watches, you think about it in those years, and also to lighten the load. Because you remember, all wars were carried on overseas, and you know, every soldier was given a kit, and that kit became heavy the more instrumentation that went on, and also transporting 4,000 watches or even 100 watches with a steel case was much heavier than transporting watches with a fiberglass case. And it allowed the government to purchase many more watches for many more warfighters. And my father was given that award for working so hard and keeping abreast with the U.S. government, going up to Ottawa, speaking to the Defense Center in Ottawa for the U.S. government. And, I think my father was always very good with Canadian American relations, and I've learned that from him. And I've visited the Canadian Embassy many times in Washington, trying to help trade between the United States and Canada. My father is responsible not just for supplying watches to the Canadian government, but we supplied many products. We had a War Department in Marathon. We still supply certain things to the US government and the Canadian government. But my father was very, you know, good at sourcing American made products for the Canadian government, as well as Canadian made products for the US government. We had major contracts for wearables that we sourced from the United States, buying special cloth from the United States. We made tents with special cloth made in Sudbury. I mean, my father is very proud Canadian, but we're also very proud to be part of America in the fact that my family is American and Canadian, and there's no reason why there should be any fighting. We should help each other. And I think that goes along to say we really come from the same cloth. And I think trade is very important between our two countries. And I think that solves a lot of things.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Are there any prototypes or rare military issue marathon watches sitting in a family archives or a drawer somewhere that collectors would be really surprised to know that they exist?
What do you want, Arctic Ranger?
Bring it out. Like, no, seriously. Anything that would knock, collectors' socks off that they don't even know that exists.
Okay, come here. Let's see what I have in my drawers.
Oh, this is where I
we have
wish
a
our
lot of
podcast
things.
was a video podcast.
You should make a video podcast. There are new items happening here, but let's see.
Oh, the camera winked out.
Did it really?
Yeah, you're still there. We still hear you. Just the camera. There you go.
Okay, you can't report on this, but this is something with a new thing.
Oh boy, look at
that's
that.
an experimental item for the chronograph, which should be coming out later on.
I know a bunch of people that DM me later saying, "What did you see? What did you see?"
There's going to be emails about this.
Here's the original SAR where the case broke.
Oh wow, I've never seen that before.
The Canadian government
That's
with
fantastic.
the Cyclops, and that's why I redeveloped the OSAR, the original SAR. This is a date, which was an officer's watch during the 1970s for the Canadian government.
That's so cool.
That was an award thing. Of course, it's in French, the date wheel. There's many interesting things. Here's the first digital watch that ever came to be. So, yes,
wow,
Casio, it's an auto mechanical watch. And actually, when we moved here to this building, we had to unload safes. We have the original safes from Montreal. And I think my grandfather even bought those safes when they were old. And we found enough kits, because we used to make these watches in Canada. We found enough kits. We have these auto digital movements, around 200 pieces. And we were thinking about reissuing them, except all the straps that came with the kits were, I guess they got dried out. So we're actually looking at reintroducing that digital watch with the original dials and everything. It's quite beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite original.
Look how Marathon Digital is written, and it says automatic, but it's all digital.
Yeah, that's very cool. Is it? It's running.
Yeah, it's running. I pulled it out of the drawer and started.
What's great.
Fantastic is, I learned a lot of things about the watchmaking business, and you could never cut corners. A lot of watch companies don't use the right oil. We use Mobius oil, only Mobius oil. What kind of paint do we use? Burlap. We use the best componentry. But the nice thing about Mobius oil, which is Swiss made, I think it comes from Lalac, you have to use different viscosity oils on different pivots to allow for the watch to run well. But the oils from Mobius don't oxidize as easy or disintegrate as easy. And in these days, the Mobius oil cost around, we just bought, I was really surprised how expensive. It was around 450 or 400 francs for one bottle of little oil. But you know what? you used to have to re-oil your watches every 5 years in the olden days because the oil used to get gucked up and slow the movement down. But the Mobius oils now um, are made of artificial synthetic oils, and they don't seem to oxidize, and they make the watch last longer between maintenance.
That's amazing.
That's wild. Um, despite all of these strict military parameters that exist in the assist database and that you have to follow when you're building a watch for the government, you've nonetheless made a number of innovations since coming to Marathon, and you just talked a little bit about the bezel and the SAR and the case and the O-ring system, etc. Can you tell us about any others that you've put into place since you've been there? And how was it done? Was it based on user feedback, like the bezel, for example?
Sometimes it's based on user feedback. Sometimes innovation comes from different suppliers that we have a better idea how to make better quality your watches and your movements. Sometimes, a light bulb turns on in your head and say, hey, if I did this, maybe it'll work better. We work very closely with a company called Salida. I know many people have known that recently, but I know Salida from maybe 30 years ago. And how I know them was we were always buying only ETA movements. Well, not always. ETA took over, was part of the Swatch group, and they took over many companies such as Valjoux, and
Yeah.
they took over many companies.
Pizzo and a bunch of others.
Yeah, which is another story, but I'll take that one off air what I think. But I have always known that we could never get enough movements when we really needed them, and ETA used to send over the Bosch and parts over to Salida, and Salida used to assemble those movements for them, and he used to, Mr. Garcia, who owned it, manage. It was a smaller factory, and he started making his own movements. And you know what? I saw what was happening in the news. ETA felt threatened and started making up false stories about Salida, that they're making their product in China and stuff like that, which wasn't true. And I know Mr. Garcia, he ran a big company, much bigger than mine, and he always gave me the time of day. I used to come into Switzerland, and we used to sit at his desk and go through the movements. And I believe the wonderful thing about Mr. Garcia and Salida is that when we had issues with movements, we had issues with the ratchet wheel on the SW220. And we couldn't figure out what it was. And we had Chumries figuring it out, and other engineers in Laboratoire Dubois and Salida itself. But we've come up with making a better product. And still to this day, I mean, there must be around 5,000 people working at the new Salida factory. And it's a phenomenal place. But the nice thing is, I come to Le Chaux de Fonds, I call up Mr. Garcia, and I'll have a nice meeting with him and go through things and how we can make things better, and what new innovations have come up. I mean, he developed that movement for my cousin of Hampton Watch, and I thought that was phenomenal. It showed how much time was left on the watch, the gauge.
Yeah.
And I know that this year our new production of movements is far superior than it ever was. And even though our watch might not look changed from the outside, we've changed a lot on the inside. Our engine has improved. Our O-ring system has improved. The quality of our O-rings has improved. The oiling has improved. With our navigator, you're going to see that, yes, we do have a mechanical, which is an automatic movement from Salida. But we make sure that we use not just any shock absorber. We still use Inca block shock absorbers. They cost more, but they save the movement upon great impact. And what I, working with ETA for our quartz movements, what's new this year is we were able to get a 7-year low power consumption movement that has a plus or minus 10 seconds per year accuracy, unheard of in a watch. And I think that it gives better assurances to the warfighter that when they put on a marathon watch, it's not going to fail them. And that's important. And our quartz watches have an end of life indicator, which means it will not die on you. It won't just stop on you. You'll know 4 months ahead of time that when your second hand starts doing 4-second intervals, that it's time to look for a new battery. And as a military manufacturer, why the hell would we make a quartz watch that you couldn't repair in the field? And we did that. We have the battery hatch that has an O-ring system as well. And any soldier could change his own battery. Doesn't need to go to a special depot or jewelry store. And that's what goes for consumers that buy our watches.
That's a fantastic quartz movement too. It's high torque, super high precision. It's a wonderful movement. You could have chosen anything, and you went with the ultimate, and it's a wonderful watch.
I think it's the FO6445. Of course, they're going to correct me and say,
no, that's
is
right.
it 445 or 145? Is
the 445? The last few digits, I don't know, but they don't say FO6.
Yeah, so there's basic FO6s, and then there's the one we use. The nice thing about that is there's a stabilizer in the IC. So amongst a big shock, the quartz movement will stop and then reposition itself to where it should have been.
Yeah, that's very cool.
It's sort of like a turtle, I don't know if you ever had any turtles. I used to have turtles when I was a kid, and I used to raise them, but they
very patient races.
Well, me and my brother downstairs in the basement, you had to find things to do. So a turtle will protect itself by coiling in.
Yeah.
And I feel that our FO6 movement that we use, it will protect itself during high heat, and it will always have that IC, that intelligence to remember exactly what time it is and resume to where it was.
That's cool. So we have a potato watch, and now we have a turtle watch.
That's it, Mark. You just coined a new name. La Tourtière. Remember La Tourtière in Montreal? I don't know if you ever ate turtle steak.
There you go.
It used to be a great restaurant chain in Montreal.
So, Mitch, in an era of GPS and smart devices, what role do you see the traditional analog field or dive watch will play in the active service?
Oh, in active service for the warfighter, it will always play a position. Do not forget that a warfighter has to be able to tell the time. The date, not so important, because you know the date. But you have to be able to tell the time. And the fact is, with warfare the way it is, you have to be able to put your instrument on top of your uniform, not your wrist, your uniform. When an explosion happens in the field, not nuclear, could be nuclear, but there's always an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse. If you don't protect that movement, and that movement isn't mechanical, and that movement does not have the proper shock absorbers or is not made right, it won't last. And it doesn't matter if you're in a war zone or not. It matters more importantly that you could be able to take the time. In Afghanistan, many of our watches were issued, and many soldiers had to stay in secret locations in the dark for a long time. And because, they had general purpose mechanical watches, they were able to synchronize attacks without any communication between warfighters. Because when you synchronize your watch at the beginning of the day or at the beginning of the week with other warfighters, you're on the exact time. So if you know that at 10:03 and 30 seconds, you're going to start the attack on this military base in Afghanistan, you're going to know the exact time, and you're all going to come out of your different caves at different times with your torpedo launchers and get the enemy. And that's really the basic thing. There are enemies, and I know people are saying, oh, you're a warmonger, but there are bad people in the world. And maybe they could become good one day, but not if they're not allowed to listen to what the rest of the world listens to. If you're turned off from the community, the world community, and seeing what's happening and keep your people as only knowing what you want them to, that's the problem with many countries. And there I get into a political discussion about,
Potatoes and turtles today.
the triangle of evil.
Well, to sidestep that,
Okay.
are there any materials or technologies you'd love to use but can't because of military constraints?
No. For the military, we could do what we need to do. We have special authorities, but of course, everything goes. We have our engineering departments working with government engineers, always working on different things, such as all military manufacturers.
Cool. In many ways, Marathon's recent Jeep collab seemed to kind of materialize out of the blue, at least for the public. But when you consider the sort of rough and tumble nature of both of those companies, the fact that Jeep came into existence in 1940, sort of, and that also Marathon began producing its first military watches in 41, the marriage seems to make a lot of sense. So how did it actually come about? Who called whom here?
So I knew this rabbi named Chezi Zions, and he was a great rabbi.
I really like the story.
And you know what he told me? He said, Mitch, nothing's by coincidence. And that's what I felt when I met my friend Hirsch at Rena. It wasn't by coincidence that I met that guy, because he taught me a lot of life lessons about humanity, and it doesn't matter, whether someone is physically or mentally able. It's your heart, your soul. Well, nothing is by coincidence, and you just happen to be there at the right time for a reason. What was the question?
How did the Jeep Marathon collaboration come together?
Oh, the Jeep Marathon collaboration. How'd that happen? It so happened that Jeep at the time was looking to collaborate with a watch manufacturer. They felt that their brand has gone down. There was a lot of manufacturers putting Jeep on the dials, but non-approved manufacturers, and they're making Jeep watches in China and different countries like that, and they're pretty crappy. And that wasn't a reflection of the Jeep. It so happened, Marty, who works for me, got wind of that, and he approached them and they asked if we'd like to entertain being it. And it so happens that our history started at the same time. So Jeep is really from the 1930s, and so are we from the 1900s to the 1930s. But what happened with World War II, Jeep came on the map. In 1941, they got the first they got contracts with the U.S. government. I think there was another name, but Jeep was being manufactured.
Willis, I think it was the Willis Jeep or the Willis.
Right, and the Oberlander and things like that. And Jeep made its foray into the military, and so did we at the same year. But what was interesting was, I don't know if you know why the name Jeep came to be. Jeep is the general purpose. It was the general purpose vehicle. GP. Jeep. That's why it was the GP vehicle. Jeep. Our
That's
watches
cool.
are actually called the GP watch, general purpose watch. And we were basically, we didn't supply the king, but we did supply his people and his war fighters, and so did Jeep. And that's a great story.
Yeah.
Cartier could supply the king with a crown,
There you
but we
go.
could supply his people with a watch.
So we've talked an awful lot about Marathon watches, but we've only kind of like moved around some of the other things that Marathon does, because there's a lot more that's going on there. So what other instruments do you produce and where are they used?
Oh, instruments such as timers, stopwatches, and
Clocks.
you're holding up that clock. How'd you get that clock?
Last year, it was a gift from you at the
Oh
Marathon
God,
TGN event.
you like the color?
I love it. It's on my desk. I stare at it every day.
That's the model 058 in green, but it's pistachio green. I thought it was. So when times weren't war times, we have always been. We might not have supplied wristwatches to jewelry stores in like 20, 30 years, but for the beginning of Marathon, we always supplied clocks to great Canadian department stores, which is our consumer division, uh, and as of late, Amazon. But uh, they're inexpensive, good quality clocks. Uh, our average amount of sales of clocks is astonishing to people, but we used to manufacture or have manufactured for us private label about 1 million clocks a year. And our customers include the Woolworth Wilco Company, Sears Roebuck, Canadian Tire, Kmart Kresge's, and we still supply Amazon with our clocks, and another great Canadian company is Home Hardware Stores, and they always carried our clocks in their stores. Things changed. Um, things changed in Canada about, I don't know how many years ago when the Two Michael story came out, but a lot of our clocks, whereas we used to make them in Germany and European countries, started making our clocks and manufacturing them in China. Well, it was Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong took over China in 1997, and I think things changed quite a bit. But we're just going to focus now. Our industry has changed, our company has changed, that we aren't going to be manufacturing these household clocks anymore. We're going to just start producing, which we have already started producing, 2 models of our, I would say, office clocks, but commercial grade clocks, because people respect commercial grade. We are not sending any more of our ICs or any of our engineering drawings to China so they could copy from us, because there's no respect for intellectual property in China. And that's my feeling. China could advance its cause by respecting international trade and international respect for intellectual property. And I've decided as leader of this company that I will not work hard in our engineering department developing new types of clocks and products just so that our technology will be given to other companies and not being kept confidential, or people will use our ideas and intellectual property for their own use. And so that's what's happened. But our clocks are still fantastic. I think we have a few 100,000 still in stock, which are being sold on Amazon, and they're great value. And the clocks that are very, you know what, are the fantastic clocks are the ones we make in Switzerland, which are our chronometers and navy wall clocks. And we have a commercial clock that we are manufacturing here called the CL03025. And we were going to make that overseas, but we decided that in Canada, we have a great automobile industry, which includes plastic and mold injection. And we started assembling our 025 large digital clock. I'll show you the clock for a minute. I know it's over. I'm going to go out in the hallway. It's not a normal interview. But,
well, one of these
so
days we're going to have to come and meet you there.
Look at this. Look at this. This is our commercial grade clock that we are making here. Cool. And we used to sell. So I don't know if you know anything about atomic clocks, but atomic clocks have a different signal in Canada as they do in Europe. And the atomic clock in Europe, we used to sell atomic clocks in Europe for our European department stores with one signal, and in Canada, North America, with another. Ours are, they go into the Frankfurt Tower and we go into the Colorado Tower.
Yeah, the NIST.
Right. And developed a dual antenna system here in Canada for those clocks. Basically, what these clocks do is tell you the exact time they reconnect with the signal every night, but it's very easy to set up.
Yeah, for sure. It does it by itself.
Well, it doesn't only do it by itself, but, being Canadian, being in the metric system since I've been a child, and also growing up in the imperial system, I know what both systems are. Fahrenheit, Celsius, growing up in Quebec. I mean, you have the month date or date month, and what other companies who make their products, they just use what is available with them. I think a company that really wants to go ahead and value is not to follow what other companies do, is to find out what's wrong and make it better. So we invested in a switch system with many switches on the back of that clock. You could choose between Fahrenheit and Celsius by a switch. You don't have to hold two buttons and keep on switching up the clock. You know exactly what's going to happen. I could have the date month or month date. It depends. If, like in Canada, you are really date month for Quebec, but month date for English Canada. And that's a big difference. In English Canada, we would have Celsius, but with a month date, but in the United States, they always use Fahrenheit. So it's easy for people to set the clock to their personal preferences by using switches at the back of the clock. Also, we manufacture this clock with a battery system that uses low battery consumption. Who wants to change? Who wants to go up on a ladder and change the batteries on a clock every year or every 2 years? You have to have a low consumption, low power consumption. And we really engineered this clock to be the best atomic clock, I think, available on the planet right now. And it's being used by many governments right now in their offices. Remember, we don't just supply military. I mean, there's health departments, hospitals, there's schools and churches, mosques, synagogues. Like, there's a lot of places where you need a clock for a crowd. And you have to be able to see the time, not just straight on, but at an angle of view. And then that makes pressurizing your LCD panels properly. And I think that what we're doing is, as a clock company, we're focusing on what we could do best. And we'll leave the simple stuff off to the people who want to sell decorative clocks.
That's so cool. No, I want one. It's not good. So, Mitch, what's the...
Okay, so you know what? Next time you're here, maybe you'll come and interview us and you could...
I'd love to I'd love to visit your place. Yeah, that would be so cool. Absolutely. So, Mitch, what's the oldest marathon you've seen come back for service and still be active in use?
Well, one of them. Well, we have pocket watches.
We're making Mitch walk all over his office everywhere. This is
Yeah,
great.
I know. I have these drawers. I love these drawer systems. Let me see something special. Listen.
Your camera winked out again.
Oh, you know why? Because when I moved it.
No worries. Oh, what's
Oh
that?
wow, that
The
looks
railroad pocket watch. Wait, I want to show you something. So we found all these gold cases of pocket watch cases. This is from the
Wow.
Liberty. Wait, you know where this case is made in? It's made in Canada by the Derby Case Company. I guess it was a case supplier to my grandfather. Is that beautiful?
Yeah,
In
look at that.
Canada,
It's
we
in
used to
perfect
make
condition.
amazing things, but we still do, and we still will. Let me see. What do we done in my magic drawers? Oh, here's a nice watch. This is from the 1940s, and it's a driving watch. And it would protect against dust by having a cover. But let me open up that.
We should have just done a podcast of you going through your drawers.
You
Like
could do that.
desk drawers.
There you go. You see that?
wow.
Yeah, that's
Isn't that
gorgeous.
beautiful?
That's really neat.
And it's
Yeah, I
got
was thinking we
like
could
a lid
bring it
has
back.
a picture in it, like a locket.
That's my grandfather and my Uncle Meyer. I don't know. My grandparents dressed him sort of like a girl. He sort of looked like a girl, but it was actually a little boy there.
That's
It
great.
was 1930s or 1920s, whatever.
That's great.
We have quite a few. Oh, look at this one. So look at this old tag, this old marathon tag. So on the back of that tag, it used to be on every watch. This is the model 325. And this is a nurse's watch. Actually, no, it's a nun's watch, but it's, but look how small it is, you see?
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, there was a great article in the New York Times recently about smaller watches coming back into fashion for many people. So this is an old watch from World War II. We replaced the crystal. And of course, I have a new battery.
Oh, it's
Not
got
a
the
new
curved
battery,
pins that I like.
new strap, but you could see how worn out the case is.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And but it's working. I'm winding it right now, and you can see this secondhand ticking. Watch this. Well, we cleaned it up. Of course, it's working. You could take any old movement as long as it hasn't been smashed and clean it up.
That's very cool.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, gorgeous dial. It's stunning.
Yeah, and that's what we based the anniversary watch for Jeep, based on that watch, actually, because that was the watch my grandfather supplied in World War II.
That's amazing. So, what's the most surprising thing you've learned from interacting with civilian collectors who buy what are essentially military tools?
Collectors, not so much. I could understand civilian collectors. I do understand that. But you know, I attended the Chicago show recently, and what I like about shows, and we're at the SHOT Show every year. What I like about working those shows is I really get to meet people who use the watches. There are people that collect our watches, and there are enthusiasts, but I just hope that people who buy our watches don't just buy them for investment to turn them around in 5 years. Mind you, a $53.75 watch that my father sold, you're lucky if you could get it for $2,000 on eBay in mint condition. But they are a good investment, but life is too short. It's like having a car in a garage. You got to drive it. You got to enjoy a watch. You got to wear it. If not, give it away to someone who could enjoy it. You know, our watches are durable. You shouldn't be afraid to wear our watches through a battle or through go hunting, go fishing with your kids. You know, there's great things to be done. And one of the, you know, groups of people who really use a lot of our watches are divers.
Yeah, we preach that all the time. Wear your watches, bang them up, scratch them up, build your memories into them. And like you said earlier in the podcast, it was very touching. Is you look down at your watch and you have that shared history with it, and it reminds you of the good times, the bad times, but the fact that you've went through it together and you've both come out through it, and it can tell a story. That's important.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I don't throw out much. Everything's been through that journey with me. Oh, yeah, the couch is falling apart, but I've been lying on it for 20 years. It's comfortable. Leave me alone.
It's got your butt imprint. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's like my dad's lazy boy.
Well, Mitchell, before we close out today, I actually have a special message here from one of your retailers in the US, and they wanted us to read it out to you. So I'll do
Oh,
that.
sure.
Mr. Wein, we're proud to be one of your authorized dealers in the US. Our interactions with everyone at Marathon Watch Company have shown us the sincerity and integrity behind your business. While watches are our passion, we also represent public servants, military personnel, and veterans sharing a love of this hobby. We admire Marathon's history of providing reliable timepieces to militaries worldwide and recognize the importance of genuine engagement over exploitation in the watch industry. This is about the dedicated people who ensure others enjoy their watch collecting journey and the stories these timepieces carry. Thank you for your commitment and much respect. Cheers. Milspec Watch Group.
Wow. That's really nice of them.
Well, they also asked that we specifically shout out Martin, Sachin, Jenny, and Joe from your team.
Don't forget Danny.
And Danny. How about that?
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to pass that on to everybody because you know what? Like a watch, if you're missing one part, it doesn't work. And with everybody working together, Marathon works really well.
It sure does.
Yeah, it really does. I'm proudly Canadian. I love it.
It's a great place to work. And don't forget to check our job section because we need more watchmakers. Here I am appealing to get more watchmakers online, but hey, there's always jobs opening here. Okay.
Definitely let our audience know, and they'll keep an eye on it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. We understand the value of your time, and I really, really appreciate everything you get through to get on board and get it started. And we had some hiccups at the beginning, but we got it going, and you gave us some great stories, and nearly made me cry a couple of times. So way to go!
Oh, really? Oh, you're welcome, Mark.
Good stories. I mean, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. The Time to Calibrate podcast is out every 2 weeks and can be found wherever you find great podcasts. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at timetocalibrate@gmail.com. Additionally, if you could take the time to leave us a review or a rating, of course, only positive ones, please, we would greatly appreciate that too. Until next time, T2C out.